big story yesterday. Northwestern fires their head football coach, Pat Fitzgerald, amid hazing claims here. And this was a little confusing here from the standpoint of we had a Friday story, discipline, two-week suspension for Pat Fitzgerald, a 6-month investigation, and then Monday he gets fired. Nothing, I don't think, changed from Friday to Monday except for the public reaction here. But Pat Fitzgerald is 48 years of age and coming off a season where they won one game, and they had a 6-month investigation. You know, credit to the Daily Northwestern because they published a story detailing allegations from a former player who described specific instances of hazing and sexual abuse. Well, who knew and when did they know? Pat Fitzgerald, did he know? Should he have known? What about the coaches on his staff? What about juniors or seniors who were on the team who maybe took part in the hazing here? Like, if we're going to do a deep dive in here, and if you want to fire Pat Fitzgerald, fire him. You know, I don't really know him. He's been on the show a couple of times. In fact, last year when they went to Ireland, before they played in Ireland, we had him on. From all accounts, upstanding coach, done a great job at Northwestern. Other than that, if he's guilty of this, you want to fire him, fire him. But I want to know who else knew about this. What did you know? Did the president know, but then he didn't reveal everything that he knew? When did he know? You know, you can look at this and say it's systemic, that there are a lot of people who knew this and it's been going on for a while. Okay. And I'm going to guess that there's hazing that continues all across the country. Also, you know, the students who are covering this story may look at this differently than somebody who's been in the business for 30 years because they would probably say, yeah, toughen up. Whereas students are going, no, that shouldn't exist anymore. It never should have existed. You know, the tradition of that, of hazing. But I talked to a former college coach last night, and he said it does continue. It does exist. He said, but it's always been a little more covert because of, you know, what's at stake here. Do coaches look the other way or wink about it? Yes. I don't know if they all do. I'm just going by somebody who used to coach on a big-time level for a long time. And just getting sort of feedback here of, how does this happen? If you know it's happening, you know, there's sexual assault that could be involved in this. You know, this isn't, you know, we're just smacking you a little bit or you're drinking. You know, if you're ever pledged in a fraternity, hey, you got to drink until you throw up, or we're going to put an egg in this pledge's mouth and then you pass it all the way down and the last guy has to swallow it. You know, these are the things that, happen when you're in, quote unquote, hazing. What they're talking about seems like it's a whole different level here at Northwestern. Yes, Paulie.
According to the official independent investigation that the president released some details from yesterday, the hazing was well known by many in the program, though the investigator failed to find any evidence that Coach Fitzgerald himself knew about it. So according to the investigation, not people's opinion, Fitzgerald did not know this was going on during his time as head coach. Now, does that change it for any of you guys? How you look at this story?
Okay. If I'm Pat Fitzgerald, of course I didn't know anything about this. Why would I admit that I knew anything about this? So, once again, when you're hearing these comments, do I think Pat Fitzgerald knew about it? I don't know. But if I'm him, I'm not acknowledging I knew about it. Did the other coaches know about this? Was there pressure, for them to come forward? But they never did. You got an interim head coach. Did he know anything about this? What about your seniors or your juniors who took part in the hazing here? It feels like there's culpability to go around. Yeah, Seton.
But football coaches can't have it both ways. You can't be the guy who, hey, I'm here 24 hours a day. Like, trust me, they know everything that's going on there. These guys are attention to detail. They're detail-oriented. They know every single thing because that's just the culture. That's just what they do. And then all of a sudden something goes wrong and be like, well, I didn't know. Well, am I supposed to know everything? Yeah. How you can't pride yourself in detail because that's what football coaches do, but then also have no idea what's going on in your locker room.
Pat Fitzgerald is in year 2 years into a 10-year, $57 million contract. So you owe him $42 million. You weren't expected to win more than 4 games, and you're coming off a season where you won 1 game. Now, I'm not saying he could have kept his job, but it feels like Northwestern wasn't able to handle this itself. Big programs handle these things. However they handle them, well, that's up to the university, up to the football program or the head coach. But Northwestern wasn't able to handle this in-house. How did it get here? How did it metastasize? And it cost Pat Fitzgerald his job here. But I want accountability for everybody involved in this. You're going to fire a head coach? Fine. What about the assistant coaches? Now, I know that there's pressure to not come forward because you don't want to usurp your head coach. Go around him. And then somebody might say, oh, now what do you do with the locker room? You got rats in there. And I go, they're not rats. Whistleblowers? Okay, they came forward. They didn't want to put up with this. There's racism that could be involved in this, comments that were made. There could be sexual assault in this. There's a lot of things to kind of unpack here. But it felt like a 6-month investigation with an independent investigation firm. They didn't find anything, but they still sort of found enough to suspend Pat Fitzgerald for 2. Like, what is 2 weeks worthy? It felt like they were just trying to, all right, something happened. Let's move on here. Hey, we addressed it. And they didn't realize the reaction from the public is the reason why Pat Fitzgerald got fired. He had a two-week suspension. And then all of a sudden, they're like, well, wait, what's happening here? People are really upset about this. Well, okay, more details came forward. More players, former players came forward. Like, you're fired. And he's going to want his money here. And maybe that's what makes it go away. And now Northwestern, relative obscurity continues here. But Pat Fitzgerald has done a wonderful job there at Northwestern. By all accounts, he's been a great coach. But how this happened under his watch, at some point you have to. Now, being on a college basketball team, there was a guy who was a spy. Now, he was related to somebody on the coaching staff. Now, he would tell that person what was going on, who's smoking pot, who drinks. There was a narc, and it was we weren't a good basketball team, but his job was sort of being the lifeguard or the hall monitor. These things happen. If Pat Fitzgerald wanted to know, he could have found out easily. If he didn't know, he could have found out. It'd be like you take the temperature of your team. You're going to find out, hey, who's the leader here? Who's a vocal guy? Who's got a problem here? This is what happens. Why wouldn't you? You're running a business. I'd want to know. Here in my office, we only have 12 people on the show. I'd like to find out what's going on with everybody. And, of course, the big German narcs on everybody, and then I'm able to find out exactly what's going on with you guys. Yeah, Paulie.
I want to go back to...
I'm joking. Yeah. It's not.
Well, I confided him in a couple of things. That's not good for me.
It's Mario. Mario is the one who's narking on everybody. Yeah, Paulie.
So Pat Fitzgerald gets fired, and we agree that Hazing is wrong. I'm wondering if this investigation pointed out specific players that are still on the roster that did this, because this would be, I would assume, a violation of Northwestern's policies of hazing and treatment of other students, student athletes. Why aren't the people who actually did this suspended, or do we not know that maybe?
I don't think that they've because you've got people who have spoken to the newspaper and ESPN, and they want to remain anonymous. I'm going to guess that they would probably still keep that confidential, but I don't know if that gets out. But I just want to know who's involved in this, because if how long's Pat been there? For over a decade. You have turnover. Did this continue? How long has this been going on? Who was involved in this? Is this just recent? What about the leadership? What about the captains here? Did they know this? And is that a violation of the moral code or ethics code at Northwestern? The coach is involved in this. The president of the university. What did he know? When did he know it? Did he act accordingly? This happens. But usually universities and big-time football programs keep it in-house. They didn't do a good job at all. But I don't know what's next with Northwestern. And maybe there's nothing because you've just fired the head coach. There's a players-only meeting today. Can you transfer? Now, are there roster spots for these players if they want to transfer to go to another program? Like, don't you have a finite amount of scholarships available? And certainly right now, here we are in July. Season starts in 6 weeks. So I don't know if you can go, I want to get out of here. I want to leave. Well, are there spots for you to go to? Yes, Eaton.
It does read, though, as small-time program, small-time coach.
Yeah.
It does read that way.
Yes, Paulie.
There is a new-ish rule with the transfer portal in the past couple of years. If for any reason your coach leaves just before the season starts, for any reason, the transfer portal is immediately open to you. That means Northwestern players, I got to look at the actual details, but like if a Northwestern player wanted to go to Illinois today, I think he could be practicing this week.
But there has to be a spot for him.
Yes.
Isn't there a finite amount of spots available here?
Someone may lose.
You can't have 150 players on the football team.
It's true, but I know there's...
I mean, you can transfer, but I'm guessing here we are in July, there aren't any spots. Yes, Eden.
Yeah, it's not just that easy as like, oh, just go play somewhere else. It's like when people say like, oh, just find a new job. Like they're not just everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it does. Pat Fitzgerald is screwed either way because it's if you did know, you're fired. If you didn't know, you're fired.
Yeah.
It's an unwinnable situation.
Yeah, this goes back to Rick Pitino. And I cautioned everybody with due process. And I would still say due process. But if it turns out that he knew about this or he didn't know and his staff did or, then you can fire him. I'm not an apologist for Pat Fitzgerald. I don't know him. I've just had him on a couple of times. And I did have somebody who worked for Pat Fitzgerald who stood up for him, spoke to him on Sunday night, strongly backed him. But, when I talked to him yesterday, I said, boy, that didn't take long. And he said it had gotten too far down the road that they had to fire him. All right, 877-3DP Show, email address dp@danpatrick.com, Twitter handle at DP Show. By the way, the students at Northwestern, that's a wonderful journalism school, and they proved it by, sometimes you don't want to uncover something that's so close to you. Like if you're a local columnist or a reporter and you go against your big-time football program, sometimes people will turn on you. And those students who did their job, well done. Yes, Heaton.
Right. If you're a seasoned vet, we'll say, as a college football reporter, you're likely friends with Pat Fitzgerald. You're not doing this. You're not writing this story.
Yeah. I had somebody who worked covering a big-time program. They're not a big-time program anymore. And he said that sometimes you get too friendly. Sometimes you get too close. Sometimes you don't want to be that guy that people will point at and say, you're the reason why we're on probation. So it gets tricky there. But these students did their job.